Okay, and we are back. All right, audio looks good, camera looks good, and we're ready to dive in. And I'm not sure what we're going to talk about today. Everything I was going to talk about, I just did a video about. And so I just kind of had a very nondescript name, which I'll do if I'm not sure what I want to talk about, and then we'll kind of go from there. So, all right. One thing I did notice when I was doing the video a few minutes ago was kind of how our linear mind starts to go and how we're directed by our soul to go a different way, right? And when I was getting ready to do the video, the whole time, I was going to do a specific one. I had a specific topic I was going to do, and then I was going to do another topic for this stream, right? And I got on, and I was like, well, shoot. I had just started talking about the one I was going to do for the stream on the video, and it really didn't even dawn on me. Like, I did the whole 25-minute video, and I didn't realize I was not doing the right one. Until the very, very end. And I realized I was not doing the right one. And that was the right one from my human perspective, you know. From my ego perspective, the one I wanted to do. And that happens quite a bit in everyday life for us, where we will sit there and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, because we have a human reason why we want to do it. And I think I thought, well, the one topic might play better live, and then one might play better on a video. The other one's a funner topic, you know, so I'll do that on the stream, because I haven't done that topic on the stream in a while. Sometimes we do some kind of heavier topics on the stream, so I'll do something a little bit lighter, and I'll do something a little bit heavier for the video, because that's what my human wanted to do. And we do that all the time. And I don't do it as much as I used to do it. You know, the longer we go into our ascension process and the longer we start to live from our higher aspects, you're going to notice that you don't do this as much. You know, you just go with the flow of the day. And if you're not going with the flow of the day, you find you get super tired. You get almost exhausted because you're not... you're kind of fighting against your natural rhythm. And that's why the human existence in general is so exhausting, because you're always fighting against your natural rhythm. You're fighting against organically what you want to do. The whole human existence is set up on what we're supposed to do. From the minute we come in as babies, we're conditioned to what we're supposed to do. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't sign up to do that. You know, we agreed to do it. We agreed to come in. We agreed to be disconnected. And for some of us, we also agreed to go through an awakening and ascension process and to reconnect. In our current human bodies, and though they do start to shift a little bit, because what you find keeps you ingrained in the human experience is the human body. So it does shift and change. As you embody in your higher aspect, as you go through more of your ascension process, your body changes, you know. I made a video last week on Instagram. I did a live, and I was talking about I could tell that my forehead had gotten bigger than it used to be. And I used to hear people talk about that. You know, I used to hear people talk about their foreheads were expanding, and I was like, that just sounds crazy. Because until it happens to you, it all sounds crazy. So anyone who tells me when I'm doing something that sounds crazy, I'm like, well, it does until you're in it, and then it doesn't sound crazy anymore. So I was noticing that. I'm like, oh, my forehead is getting bigger. And it's because you start to have cranial expansions. Everything starts to kind of get bigger in a sense, but you drop density as it gets bigger. You drop a lot of the human programming, but your body does kind of shift and change because it has to. It wasn't built to hold all of your soul, you know, so it has to, only a little bit of your soul is in the body. Majority of your soul is not in the body. And I say this, and every time I say it, I know people roll their eyes at me, because I used to roll my eyes when people would say it. I remember I had someone say that to me once, that my soul was over there, and it did not want to go back in. Because I was going through a very rough human experience at the time, and it probably was like, screw that, I don't want to be in there, this is miserable in there. So we're going to find a lot of times that when we hear certain things, we immediately will kind of balk at them, right? Because they just feel so ridiculous to what we've been told, you know? We've been conditioned to believe our soul is in our body. And we're conditioned to believe that, so we don't really go exploring for our soul. We don't go spelunking for anything. You know, we believe it's there, it's fine. Even though everything our human body does in a human template goes against what the soul wants. You know, very rarely, when you're ingrained in your human experience, do you do what the soul wants to do. It is almost like you're on the poem, you know, the road less traveled poem, and you have to make that choice at some point. You know, at some point you have to make that choice on what are you going to go do. You know, which way am I going to go here? Because I can't do them at the same time. You know, I can't do a human journey and a soul journey at the same time. They're two completely different templates. They're two completely different frequencies. They're two completely different timelines. You can't, they don't exist together. And I was watching, which actually spurred the video I did. I was watching the show Outlander, and it always comes up about the different collectives and timelines and time travel. It's always kind of a fun one to kind of dissect in higher consciousness and kind of show different ways we perceive things. But in a lot of, and I completely lost my train of thought on where I was going to go with that, but maybe it'll come back to me, or maybe it won't. But a lot of that show is, no matter how crazy the physical stuff is in the show, where it's a show where she travels through time touching a stone, right? And she can go back in time, and she can go forward in time, and she can kind of experience everything. And then eventually the family gets separated somewhere in the future, somewhere in the past. And, you know, it feels like, you know, and they're both in completely different timelines, you know, bridged only by the consciousness of the people that are experiencing the different timelines, where one person, one timeline can dream about the other timeline because the consciousness can go there. But they are in two separate timelines. And I guess that's where I was going to go with that example. So when we're talking about our human template and our soul template and our human timelines and our soul timelines, and we have different iterations of our soul timelines, because the higher we go, the less tainted they are by our human ego. There's less of that in those timelines. We start to make decisions that are not based on our human wanting to be loved. You know, we're doing things for love, not to get love, not to be loved. It's a very different mentality we start doing things for. We stop doing them for ourselves. We start doing them because there is a big distinction in doing something to be loved and doing something for love. You know, the soul does things for love. It doesn't do things to be loved. A lot of times when you do something from purity and love, soul love, it's not going to get you liked. It's not going to get you liked, much less is that person going to look at you fondly, because they might not like the decisions you made. Because that's not their version of love. Our human has a very distorted version of love, and a very tainted version of love. And it's a very self-centered version of love, which we've kind of been conditioned to sort of buy into over time. So they're just two completely separate things. So when we look at, you know, I think I titled this what we don't do does matter. What we want to do from a soul perspective and what we do from a human perspective. And for a while, they're two completely different timelines. They're two completely separate things. We keep them separate for a reason, because we don't even realize there is another one, because we're under the illusion that our soul's in the body, and our soul is, we can't make decisions without our soul. Even though you will touch on things that spark the soul in your human journey. That's the whole point of the human journey, in a sense, is to reconnect to the soul. It's just some people have different timelines built in, and the amount you were able to do as far as bring the soul in, not just connect with higher consciousness, but actually embody it. That a lot of people will say that gateway opened in 2012, where that was now a capability, where as of 2012 you could now embody in your soul, you can embody in your aspects, you could live from these aspects, not just touch on these aspects. You know, there was a big shift in what we had the human body was going to have the capability to do, and what all of a sudden energetically we were going to have the capability to do. Now once that year hit, you found there were a lot of different people who had come kind of before that, pre-2012, and were actually hitting, you know, they're the end of a certain part of their ascension in 2012 to assist everybody else coming through the next wave. And we've talked a lot on this channel about different waves of ascension and where you fall. If you're in the first wave, there's 3 sections to each wave. Each wave's like a 10-year period, and you're going to fall in one of the 3 waves in a 10-year period. Once that 10-year period is done, then you just kind of collapse all into sort of the same wave, right? The same iteration. And every year there's more and more people. You know, it's kind of like a very slow burn of the Matrix in a sense, where people start waking up, but it's not as quick. You know, the Matrix, the movies kind of make it that all of a sudden you have a choice, which I always think is kind of funny, that you have a choice if you want to or not. And in your human existence, you have a choice to a point. You have different ways you could go, and you're gonna see a lot of this in hindsight, because it's always easier. It's impossible to take higher consciousness until you achieve higher consciousness, and that's going to sound a little around the bend. So let me go back and see if I can break that down. Until you reach a higher consciousness state, you can't go back and see anything from that perspective, right? And when you see it through a different filter, and you start to go back and look at all the times in your human life where you had the ability to wake up if you wanted to. Like, I can see a lot of the early 2000s for me, where I was doing had a lot of physical stuff going on, a lot of things that I didn't know what was going on with my body, that I could see my body was trying to wake up. You know, it just wasn't my exact time yet, so that exact time didn't happen until later. But some of that groundwork was laid then, and you're going to see that really your whole life is trying to get you to wake up. But there's going to be certain times when that's kind of it, right? And for a lot of people, they start that process at a similar time. That's why you get all these cliches, like a midlife crisis, where people leave their spouses, they spend a lot of money, that they're all of a sudden very disenchanted with their life, and which used to make them happy, now it doesn't anymore, because it didn't keep them happy. You know, all of a sudden everything starts to change, and because a lot of these things, a lot of people have a similar marker, because they're linked up to a similar collective, the same collective, it gets labeled a thing, right? Oh, that's this human thing. It's not something else. And a lot of people, what they find is when they go through that seeker phase, it's kind of what a human will delve as kind of a midlife crisis. It's kind of the beginning of an awakening process, in a sense, where you're not happy, but you're not sure what you want to do. So you kind of go out and try to grab a lot of different things, trying to find the happiness again, but none of it really works. So either you end up going back sort of to the old stuff, or after a long period of time, I'm going to use time here because in a human frame it'll feel like that's what it is, because it takes so long to develop some of these timelines, because we have so much to work through that blocks the timelines from coming in, keeps our body in a frequency where those timelines don't exist. We arrive in higher timelines because our body's frequency is the frequency now of that timeline. That's how we get there. We don't get there from just thinking about the timeline. A lot of stuff you're going to read, a lot of stuff you're going to see, it's very energetic in a sense, where they say all you got to do is do it energetically, right? But the paradox of that is you really can't just do it energetically until you get to a point where you're that powerful energetically to be able to move a lot of stuff around energetically. You have to move some stuff around physically first. So it starts with the linking into higher consciousness, right? And that's from the heart. People say open your heart, right? Open your heart up, link into higher consciousness. You know, channel, expand, get into your energy field. You might get into the chakras. You might get into Reiki. You start getting into all the stuff that's not the physical. It's the gateway to what people will call the fifth dimension, right? And some people are not understanding that's not the only dimension. That's just the beginning. Because energetically, you're just tapping into these feelings. You're unlocking that connection. You're starting to expose yourself to higher consciousness material. Some of your life is very much still rooted in human experiences and human existences and human realities, but your consciousness is in a fifth dimensional place or higher. You know, you're always going to work within 3 dimensions. You know, 3, 4, and 5, 4, 5, and 6, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 10, 10, 11, 12. You're always going to be operating. Your body's going to be, to me, my body's always in the lowest of those 3 dimensions, and my consciousness is is even during the day and on one of the upper epsilons, and at night, it's exponentially as far as you want to go, because you have no hampering by the body about how far you can go. So, you start to kind of move a lot of things very energetically. You read a lot of books about, I'm going to use the word telepathy. It is a human word. I just like, some people call it ESP. I just like to call it reading the field. You just read your energy field. And the more you read your energy field, the more you see and feel so many different things you didn't catch before. Your dream world starts to open up. But we're still working very energetically, because we have to start to work energetically to start to move the pieces outside. And in the beginning, we start to see the pieces move outside because things start to not work, things start to collapse, timelines start to close out, and we feel like we didn't do it right. Because in our mind, because we still have a lot of human programming in this stage. People think they don't have that anymore. You still have a lot of that in those beginning years, because it's ingrained in the body. And still we start working through what roots our body there. What the body keeps us locked in these timelines. You expose yourself to higher consciousness, you start to transform the DNA of the body. Your environment will recode your DNA. It shifts your DNA, it changes your DNA. That's even shown in human science, that the more you subject, the environment will affect the DNA. So your DNA starts to shift. And when that starts to happen, the human stuff, not only doesn't work anymore, it gets so discordant it can't exist anymore. So our old life starts to fall away. We start to see jobs go. We might see friends go. Might see partners go. All of a sudden, all these things start to go. And because that was what we thought we were supposed to be building on and not building anew. And there is a difference and a confusion about what we're building on and what we're start to kind of rebuild and what we kind of feel like we're supposed to do, because we don't know any better at the time. I didn't know any better at the time, even though I'd heard a lot of people say it. Until you experience it, you don't kind of get it yet. You can't keep the old and start the new. We do that in our human existence in a sense where we end a job and start a new one, even though the new one it's in a higher timeline, because we're always incrementally ticking up. We're starting a new timeline. We're starting something else. But we're not 100%. We're still in the same frequency, just starting at it again to see if we can do it better. It's still the same loop. We haven't jumped enough out of that frequency to completely leave that stuff behind yet. We're still working through the depth of our programming. We're still working through just skimming off one layer. You kind of will see it as almost like just picking off a little bit, skimming off a layer of something, but still that thick you got left to go. So in those phases, we still think we're building, we think we're going to take the soul and smish it into the human stuff, and that's ascension, right? And we try to take the lessons of spirituality, which that's just the beginning. I mean, eventually you have to become spirit informed. If we stay stuck in the spirituality phase, we never embody anything. We're still in that energetic phase of I can think and it can happen. In the beginning, I will say, because we're in such a disempowered state, anything we do, we start to see it open up very quickly. Because our universe is just waiting for us to say, yeah, show me. Let me see what I can do. Let me have this. Let me have this stuff. Let me have the fun. Let me see the magic. Let me see the butterflies. Let me see if I can create a rainbow today. What can I do? So in the beginning, it starts to come really quick. What we feel like is really quick because we're so shut down. We don't even realize that once we open ourselves up to it, how amazing everything looks. The colors are brighter. Everything is different because in different realities, the coloring is different in a sense. So as we continue to grow and go and expand, we start to see all this stuff. We start to see how it shifts, how it changes, how it becomes something else, how we start to become something else. And then it takes a while for us to realize that we're not trying to augment the old with our knowledge or our existence. We're going to create the new, which means the old has to go. And that is the sticking point. That is the grief. That's when all the grief starts to come. The sadness will get on earth. And that's a huge part of the process. Because we have to let the stuff go. And when we're still kind of trying to, it's almost like a Rubik's Cube when you're in that trying to augment the old process. You're trying to align one side, and you can kind of get one side right where that feels that's aligned, but then all the other sides are out of whack. And the part of ascension a lot of us don't get at those moments because it's too daunting. We would not want to continue unless we had a win here, a win there, even if it was a small win. Because there comes a time where you'll feel like you just get a lot of L's in a row from your human perspective because nothing is going the way you wanted it to. Nothing was the way you thought it was going to go. Nothing was the way you were promised, in a sense. You know, I was promised all this stuff would happen. And none of it's happening like that. You know, I was promised moonlight and roses, and this is just one shit show after another of trying to clean up a mess that I made in a human existence. So how do I get out of that? You know, how do I all of a sudden, how am I going to be able to transcend all of that? And that can take a lot of us kind of anchoring ourselves in and really looking at what is possible here. What can I do here? You know, what am I capable of doing here? And this is the time where a lot of us, we kind of leave the keys in the door of a lot of things and just walk away because we're not capable of aligning at all. It doesn't mean we don't have to revisit it. And this is when we start getting into the physical part of ascension where we've actively embodied, we're always actively embodying an aspect, whether they're soul aspect or galactic aspects. But we have to start having boots on the ground at some point. We have to start living it. And living it means shifting your life. And that is the part that's kind of the trial and error. That's where you're almost trying to build your own Rubik's Cube at that point. You're not trying to rework the old one. You're trying to build a new one where everything comes in aligned. Everything is not even allowed in unless it is aligned. And that can lead to a lot of lean years where nothing's really coming in because nothing's really aligned. And everything, you can see the issues with everything as far as the purity of the timeline. You can see the agenda of everything going on. Even we see our own agendas and stuff. And we have to kind of pump the brakes and say, okay, that's not going to work. We have to kind of resolve everything that is aligned, but we don't like. And that's with our existence and everyone else's existence. You know, I know say it's not my choice that a reality goes down this way, but if it's highest aligned for everyone in it, then that's how it's going to be. I don't have to like it. My human doesn't have to like it, but I will respect its highest aligned and support that timeline. Instead of getting attached to one human outcome and getting really upset and really agitated when that doesn't happen. Because we start to see what's highest aligned. We start to rework things in that way. We start to really come into our own about being able to see what's coming and understand why it has to happen that way and understand that there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why we have to set by a lot of times, most of the time, pretty much all the time, and let people get hit by the train. Because if they don't get hit by the train, then they don't have the experiences they need to go on and do what they need to do. You know, a lot of times we feel like the train is going to be the worst thing that happens to us, but it's more the fear of the train coming. You know, I think I did a stream on fear last time. I think I did a stream on the fear and how it's never scary as we think it's going to be once we go through it. And once you go through it once, you're like, oh, whatever, happened before. If it happens again, it is what it is. You know, because you don't have the fear anymore. It's kind of, it's got a happier outcome when you feel fear about something. Once you resolve the fear, you get to a place of peace inside. Whereas when you feel happy about something and that thing goes away, and you realize it didn't keep you happy, and then you're looking for the next thing, there's a lot bigger letdown really in that for a while than just busting through the fear. Because we do start to see why things come in and the purpose of them. And it's not the purpose we kind of want it to be. I've talked a lot on here about timelines I wanted to be one thing or the other, and it's just not what they were supposed to be. And no matter how much I tried to rework my Rubik's Cube to get everything aligned, it wasn't going to happen. You know, it just wasn't going to happen. Because we can't align everyone else in the reality. We can only align our part of it. And if we align what we're supposed to be in that reality, but that's not what everyone else wants to participate in, then it's not aligned. It's not agreed upon. You know, it was agreed upon for this certain set of circumstances, this certain stimuli in this reality. The minute we shift anything in there, we've now shifted the timeline. And the minute we do that, we're in a new one, and that doesn't mean everyone has to come with us. Now, once we do a lot of that physical reworking, we start to be able to go into things and continue to work with them energetically. But we have to learn to do the physical stuff first. And Well, let me back that up a little bit. We'll go through the energetic phase in the beginning, then we get to the actually applying what we're learning, what we're remembering, what we're starting to comprehend, how things work. We have to apply it. Then we'll also be working energetically at the same time, but we have to apply what we're learning. We have to apply what we see we're supposed to do from a soul perspective. And if we don't do that, then we just keep prolonging it and prolonging it and prolonging it, and it ends up being just this long run of the same stuff until it kind of ends in just a fiery blaze, in a sense, because we have to let it burn down. And we don't realize that by us trying to keep it going, we're not doing it justice. We're not doing anyone in the timeline justice. We're just hanging on to it because we want something out of the timeline. We are not ready to let it go. Anytime we are really holding on to something that we know is not aligned, it is too hard. It shouldn't be this hard. When you see something unfold very organically, we realize how simple it is. But until we start to see those moments where we're like, oh, I needed this, and all of a sudden someone I know gifted me that, or I got it in the mail, or someone said, hey, I saw this and I thought about you, and I was like, here you go. And it's so easy that we start to see how many of the other ones aren't. And we just hold on to them because of a stubbornness, because we believe, because we have reached some kind of enlightenment, that we can now bring it down and restructure what's not aligned in the first place. Not understanding that these things are to show us what's not aligned so we can exit them, not try to retrofit them. And that's what we do for a lot of ascension, I feel. I feel like it's a lot of trying to retrofit the old until we get to another part of our conscious where we understand this is just not aligned long term. This is just not aligned. It doesn't mean there's some timelines you're not going to find yourself in that you're going to know, okay, I know it's not aligned. I'll always say, be kind to me. I'm going to ride this out. When it's done, and I'm not going to try to retrofit it to let it stay. I would normally do that I would do that one on the ones where I felt like I was trying to rush through them a little bit. I knew they weren't aligned long term, so I would say, okay, I'm just going to let it peter out on its own then. Because every time I've tried to rush the ending, I'm trying to get up and leave the movie, and the doors are locked. I'm getting trapped in here. I can't leave yet. Because a lot of times we'll see later, there are other things that have to be in place. There are other things that have to be lined up. You're not just the only one going into some of these other timelines. There'll be other people in there too. And if they're not in the right space, then you can't go there yet. So there's a reason why sometimes we feel like we're in a holding period on a lot of stuff. That we know it's not aligned to the highest of the high, but it's aligned to something we have to do right now. And that's a whole other, part of the journey we're on. It's to be able to tell the difference. And to not hold on to because, okay, it's highest line. What's highest line right now? It might not be highest line 20 minutes from now. It might just be highest line 2 months from now. But right now it is. Is it the highest of the high? No, it's not. You'll be able to know that. It's not the highest of the high. But this is where I'm supposed to be right now. There are other things going on. You could be clearing something. Normally we always are. We're clearing something in the meantime to get to the next thing. I did a video on the spring, on the summer solstice about how we start getting our templates now. And as we get our templates now for the next year, we might just be registering it. We might not be able to feel the whole new what we're going to be doing next year yet. But we know what we can't take with us to the next year. We know the baggage we have to drop. We know the program we have to work through. We know the relationship we have to come resolve as far as all the issues we have around it to see, can I bring this to a higher timeline? Or is it just going to be resolved in that timeline and that'll be closed out? It'll show us what we can't take forward. Because in the new timeline, we have to be done with this. It's like when we talked before about meeting different people along the way. And even though you might not talk to someone at the time, you might see them again 3 or 4 years later and have a really poignant reality with them. And in the last 3 years, it's just been maybe seeing them in a place here and there, maybe talking to them, maybe not. But energetically, you're exchanging information to see if we're prepping for that timeline. Or is it time yet? Can we now have this reality? Or are we going to still be we're still in a place where we can't yet? So, okay. I do want to check my chat because I've been going kind of a while. Maybe. All right, I do have some questions, but I don't know if I understand them. So, if anyone does have a question, they can, maybe expand on that just a tad bit, because I usually do check the chat a little bit toward the midway point for me. If not, I get distracted about what I want to talk about first. So, okay, I do have something that mentions an onion is kind of a metaphor here. And an onion is kind of a metaphor peeling things back. And every time I hear that, I always think of the movie Shrek when the donkey is like, oh, it's no one likes to peel back an onion. And that's kind of a really great metaphor, actually, now that I'm kind of talking through it. Because the more we get into our human existence, the more we realize it is so terrible. And everything we created is just one big mess upon another big mess. And we kind of don't want to keep doing it. We kind of don't want to peel it back. So there's going to be a lot of times when we're in this kind of deconstruction phase where we feel like all we're doing is deconstructing. And the reconstruction is so slight and so small because we're only aligning a little part at a time, because that's all we can see yet. We're still got our vibration in one timeline. It takes a while for our body's vibration to raise out of that completely. So for a while, we'll feel like so much is falling apart, and very little is coming together. And we're going to be in that phase for a long period of time, because it takes time for these templates to rework. It takes time for your DNA to recode. This is not something where we get to it all of a sudden. I watched the movie. I've seen this movie before, but I felt like to watch it again. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, when he was aging backwards. And it's kind of almost like a parody of what the soul will do. Like, you come in and the soul's really old. So it's almost like you're viewing everything from the soul perspective. Of how old the soul is when it comes in. And then as he ages, it's almost like there's a reversal there. And as he starts to get to a certain period, he starts to look younger and younger and younger. Whereas when you get into a lot of your soul timelines, and you work through your human template, you will start to de-age. And you'll feel like one day you feel like you're really old, and the other day you feel like you've de-aged. Your DNA starts to repair, but that stuff doesn't happen overnight. I've heard a lot of people talk about eyesight repairing for them, where I think it might have taken 10 to 15 years, where they might have been wearing heavy glasses, and then all of a sudden they're not wearing glasses at all anymore, because their body has repaired to that extent. I think where our human expects everything to be overnight. We talk about DNA repair, when we talk about rebuilding the templates of our life and restructuring our matrix, we feel like it's going to be just as fast as it's depicted. We feel like it's going to happen right away. We don't see the latency, because of the magnitude of work we have to do. But it doesn't mean those aren't enjoyable times too. Just now that I'm in a certain place, I can now go back and look at these things from a different consciousness and see where I impeded myself so much because I was really trying to retrofit something that didn't fit together. You're trying to take a square peg and put it into a round hole, and you don't understand why it doesn't work. And that kind of brings everything that you thought you understood more in question. It's like, I thought I got this, but now I realize I don't understand that. And I thought I understood what that would be. Or we always feel like we're farther along than we are. We feel like we're really into higher consciousness when we're still very much in our ego. And there's a lot of that goes on in this process, because it takes a long time for us to shed that. And people think the ego just means you think a lot of yourself. That's one small aspect of the ego, but also your ego is wanting someone to love you. That's your ego, wanting to do something because you feel like it's going to enhance your success or your fame, or just believing in the collective of what we've been trained to believe, what makes someone a good human. All that is messed up in your ego. It's not just, I think very fondly of myself. That's a very narcissistic view of the ego. But that's not the only part of your ego. Everything ingrained in human consciousness is the ego. It all is. So don't get so bogged down on everything we created in a human template from our human aspect. Which means when we were asleep and didn't even realize there was higher consciousness, it is distorted. It's built on sand. it's not going to last when you try to take it through the wash and rinse of ascension. You know, it's not going to. That does not mean certain people won't be able to come with you. And a lot of people will see that and get very resistant to it because they don't want to give all these things up. It doesn't mean everything has to go. It's just not going to look the same. The people won't act the same. You know, it's going to be a totally different thing. So as long as we understand that. But that doesn't mean that everyone has to go. There's still people that are in my existence that I probably would have thought they wouldn't make it through. But because of different iterations of different, soul contracts we have, there's different reasons some people are still there. And some relationships are still there. So you don't want to go into the fear factor of everything has to go. It's just going to get very much reworked. It's going to be very much revamped. It's going to be a different version of it. It's kind of like watching two extremes. Like if you think of your human experience, it's kind of like going through a House of the Dragon episode, and then think of your soul experience as more of like some kind of Disney version movie of the same thing. Then you're going to start to feel the difference in the two realities. You know, there's more magic in one. The other one feels darker. It feels very constrained. It feels very constricted. That's just what it is. So as we go, we need to really be able to, as we go through the journey, really be able to hone in on that stuff and really look at, it doesn't really matter where you are. You know, what's more important is how we're dealing with where we are. You know, I always said I wanted to rush through every timeline I had. Like, I want to go to the next one. I don't like this one. I don't want to clean up this mess. I want to go into the next one, not understanding that the cleaning up the mess is the point. If I can't clean up the mess, then I'm just going to go into another reality where there's a bigger mess. Because when I'm not able to do it, and I'm not capable of doing it energetically to do all this, then I'm saying I'm not ready for the next one yet. We all have to be in a certain place to be able to really assist and really play the role we're supposed to play in the next timeline. And if we're not there, we're going to find ourselves in a purgatory period for a long period of time, and we're going to depict how long that is. How long we're resisting what we know we're supposed to do, and we just don't want to do it because we don't like how it looks. We don't like how it's going to look to others. You know, we don't want to make the big leap. We want to be able to stay in the safe spot of what our human thinks is safe, which is the most unsafe place ever, honestly. You know, human realities are not safe. But they're more known to us because we understand them. You know, that's why we had this illusion of safety, even though they are not safe. And I notice it is pouring down raining out, and it has really been raining here for like 6 days straight. So, okay, I guess on that note, I'm going to go and watch it rain. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's everything. So, okay, that's it. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye.